my name is Kora Mousseaux. I'm the Community Water Resource Conservationist at Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, and today I'll be talking about household and residential water conservation. So just a brief outline today. I'm going to give a brief overview about the district. Just curious show of hands, who has heard of Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District? Okay, that's good. So I'll be super brief. I'm happy. Sometimes I don't see those show of hands, so that's good to know. And then I'll go and start why we should conserve water, and then I'll start with indoor water conservation and then work our way to the outdoors. And I think kind of similar format as the last talk. If possible, unless it's a super quick clarifier question, we can just hold those until the end as we have a limited time here. And before I get started, Paul and I have also put out some resources in the back table similar to water resources. And so I have some summary notes on my presentation as well as some other resources. So feel free during the breaks and lunch to go check out those. All right, so a brief overview about the district. So we are a special district serving Jackson County. So we are paid through a tax rate similar to a fire district or a school. And our main goal is to serve Jackson County residents and landowners with their natural resource concerns. We've had a tax rate since '06, and so that's really helped with our capacity. We now have a staff of 10, and we all serve different programs and priorities in terms of what we cover. And we've been established along with all of the other districts from the Dust Bowl era. So we're think of us as a local version of Natural Resources Conservation Service. So our primary driving force at the district is technical assistance, and we can get that technical assistance in many ways. We do have a small grants program, and we also can help connect landowners to state grants as well. We also have education programs where we do talks like this, and we have water conservation or water monitoring programs as well. And so we try and cover all of the angles in terms of tackling that technical assistance. These are some of the priorities and programs that we focus on. I went ahead and just bolded water conservation because that's what we're talking about today, but you can take a look at all the other things that we like to focus on. All right, so diving into water conservation needs, and I'll be pretty brief with this because the Water Resources Department did a really great job overviewing. So why should we conserve water? Well, as we all know, our water falls as snow. And so I know most of you are on wells, and whether you're on city or on well water, we really all rely on snowpack. For surface waters, it's more of that instant gratification in terms of water recharge, and then groundwater, obviously it takes some time as well. And as we all know, particularly these last few winters, snowpack has been very inconsistent. Some years are really great, some years aren't so great. And so kind of the overarching message is we should conserve water because that recharge isn't always guaranteed and the amount of recharge isn't always guaranteed. And so this looks very familiar. I just wanted to kind of set the stage with snowpack, and so I know we've already seen this, so I'll move on. But you know, we're not completely amazing for the dead of winter, but it's also not in the red, so that's something. And these are more outdated. I wasn't able to get the most recent report, so I'll just kind of keep going. I don't think we saw the soil moisture indicator. So this is as of January 1. I think they are just releasing the report maybe today. So just missed it, but it looks like we're at about 20% to 30% of soil moisture for drought. So, you know, not great for winter. And we already saw this one. This is a more outdated, so we'll just move on. All right, so let's talk about indoor water conservation. What can you do inside the home? And then we'll work our way outside. And with everything, I always recommend starting small and practical and then working your way from there. Water conservation as a whole does not have to cost that much money, if not at all. I always want to focus more on the behavioral change, and then if you're able to afford more water saving measures, you certainly can. So just in general, checking faucets are a great way to make sure you don't have any water leaks. This goes for both indoor and outdoor. Slow water leaks and slow drips can really add up. So it's more just checking on your whole system, making sure that everything is in tip-top shape and not leaking is a great way just to make sure. A way that you can see if you have a water leak, for example, if your water bill all of a sudden spikes, you can check if you're on a water meter or if you have a well sensor. If you know you're not using water for an hour or two, you can check before and after. And if that water level has gone up or if the water usage has gone up, you know you likely have a leak. And then you can ground truth from there. Some really simple things you can do is install a faucet aerator. It's pretty self-explanatory. It adds air to the water for a faucet, and that can save up to 50% of water. So pretty cheap and simple way to save water. And you can also consider insulated pipes, both indoor and outdoor, as you're installing them. I understand it's not always practical once they're installed, but that can be a very simple way so the water isn't running continuously in order to heat up or cool down depending on the season. All right, so I'm gonna kind of go room by room. And so there's a running theme of just not having that water run continuously. So with kitchen, maybe having a bucket so that water doesn't run down the drain. You can use it to water plants. You can also, with more money, you can also replace old appliances. The older dishwashers are way less water efficient, and the newer dishwashers you can adjust for the load size and also making sure that you don't run your dishwasher unless you have a full load. So just little simple things that we're all aware of to save the water. Bathrooms are one of the bigger contributors, I'd say, based on kind of the metrics I was looking at. I think toilets are the biggest culprit for inside the house. It's about 25 to 30% of indoor water use is from the bathroom. So certain things you can do: take shorter showers. That, you know, we can all try and do. In the summer, you can try and collect that water, any water that's draining off, with a bucket and use it to water your plants. You can replace toilets with more of a low flush, and you can avoid running the faucet as you're shaving or brushing your teeth, just turning that off. Just little things that we can all do. Moving into the laundry room, similarly to with the dishwasher, you can replace it for a newer version that's going to be way more water efficient. You can adjust the load size, and yeah, I think that's all from that. There will be a whole talk on gray water, so I didn't want to go too far into gray water, but that can definitely help with household water conservation. And for outdoor surfaces, a lot of the times, I've even seen it in the rain, a lot of people like to hose off their driveways. Just something to consider for saving water. You can use a leaf blower. I prefer electric because it's less gassy and noisy. Or you can just use a broom, right? So just different ways to not have to use water. And also, I recommend going through a car wash rather than washing in your neighborhood. Not only will that save yourself water, but that water is going to be properly recycled. Otherwise, it'll go straight to the storm drain and then straight to the fish. All right, so now working our way outside. So this is a spec for Medford, but I think it's just useful for residential data, which certainly can cover rural living as well. So this is from July through July, and I'm curious what the more recent years are. This is on their Medford Water Commission website. But about 20 to 25,000 gallons of water is used in houses in the summer. And so this water usage pretty much triples or even quadruples depending on the season. So really goes to show a lot of municipal water, or not just municipal, but residential water use is focused on outdoor use, outdoor irrigation, lawn irrigation. So that's why my talk is more so focused on outside, because I think it's kind of the bigger bang for your buck in terms of behavioral change. So I'm going to start small, behavioral, and cheap, and then work our way to more larger scale and expensive. So first things that you can do for approaches to that outdoor water conservation is enhance your irrigation practices. Paul's going to do a whole talk on more agriculture irrigation, and so I'll kind of just brush over that and focus on more lawn irrigation. But super important to make sure that your system is checked on. Again, making sure that you don't have any leaks. And if you have an automated system, it's important that that is adjusted based on climate. Some of the systems are super smart and they can connect with your phone. The others are more analog and they're perfectly fine, but they won't automatically adjust. So if it's going to rain next week, you can completely turn it off. That way you're not double watering, things like that. Number 2 is lawn maintenance. I always recommend mowing your lawn at the highest setting. This does a couple things, but it all ties to root strength. The stronger the roots are for your lawn, the more water holding capacity it has. And it doesn't take much in order to create that root strength. And the more water holding capacity means that you're not going to have to water as much. It also means that it can outcompete weeds. And so that's just beneficial all around. And I always recommend avoiding runoff and pollutants. So if you do apply any pesticides or fertilizers, making sure you're following the label. Have to tie in some stormwater because it's all related after all. All right, so here's just some basic types of sprinkler heads. Obviously, it's going to depend on your setup. If you have a larger field, you could certainly use a rotor head or an impact sprinkler. But by and large, if you just have some, if you're looking at the zone around your home and you're just focusing on your lawn area, you typically don't need a larger sprinkler setup than a spray or a rotor nozzle. A lot of folks, or a lot of us just inherit our irrigation systems with our homes. And a lot of times the sprinklers are overly sized. And so you could be losing a lot of water just due to that overly sized and due to evaporation. So picking the proper sprinklers for the site can help with water savings. Here's that root depth. So just mowing a little bit more can very much increase that root strength. And that can hold, contributes to the soil organic matter, which can hold tens of thousands of gallons of water. So it's completely free and it can save a lot of money in terms of water savings. Again, just how to throw in checking pipes for leaks. And then Jem will do a whole talk on water storage tanks, so I won't go any more into that, but it's certainly a tool in the toolbox for offsetting water usage around the home. And now we're getting to the more intensive things that you can do besides just behavioral change. So I'll be diving into lawn replacement, water-wise landscaping, and then you can also consider installing some stormwater features within that. So it's functional year-round, both in the summer and in the winter, so excess water has places to go. All right, so diving into water-wise landscaping, which is also called xeriscaping. Now, a lot of times xeriscaping is perceived as xeroscaping, meaning a lack of landscape, and that isn't necessarily accurate. It doesn't mean you have to replace your entire lawn. Lawn can be practical if you have pets or kids or just like the aesthetic. Really, all xeriscaping means is that you're striving to use water more efficiently in your yard. And so I'll be going through the steps of this, and I also have the steps in my resources, so you certainly don't have to have all this memorized. So these are the 7 steps I'll be going through. So number 1 is planning and design, and this really goes for any project you want to do on your property. Having a proper plan is a great start, and there's certain things to consider within your plan. I always like having more of a baseline plan. So what are the existing features on your site? What are the permanent things that you can't move? What are the impervious surfaces? Where are your downspout locations? Your utility boxes, trees, things like that. And then you can start overlaying other possibilities in terms of where you want to remove certain sections of lawn or where you want to install different features on your property. Also, other things to consider are low spots on your property. This might be where there's lower slopes, or maybe you have a small leak and you don't know, but you have a little green patch. These are things to consider when you're switching up your property, because that might turn into a water conservation priority for you. And planning your budget and timeline are also really important, making sure that you do research, get different bids if you're hiring out help, trying to avoid unknown costs. Again, this is more of an expensive approach than just behavior change. Depending on the materials that you use, it can be $5 to $20 per square foot for replacing your lawn. And the best time of year to do that, I would say, is in the summer, so then you're not working with a mud pit in the winter because you will be exposing soil. And you can do that by hand removal. Sod cutters are super useful. And you can also try and solarizing certain sections of your lawn with a tarp. Thinking of the word. So it's super customizable with waterways landscaping. It really just comes down to aesthetics. So you can have kind of more of a formal aesthetic all the way to a natural aesthetic. Really depends on what your interests are. So creating practical turf is step 2. So again, you don't necessarily have to remove all areas of lawn. It's just removing the certain sections that you want. And so here's some things to think about when we're talking about practical turf. So you could think of it simply as just as accessibility. You know, steeper slopes are a pain to mow, and so you could think about, well, if you have a steeper slope area, you could just remove that section and do more of a terraced landscaping. You could consider around the home, so you don't have to mow right against the home, just certain areas, and then go from there. And so all of this also, I should mention, is a feedback loop. These steps aren't always necessarily in order besides planning, and it all ties back to planning. So grouping similar plants is step 2. And when we talk about similar plants, it's based on their microclimates. And so some sections of your yard, they're going to be sunnier, some are shadier, some will require more water depending on that sun and shade, and it also depends on your soil type. So picking plants that will fit the site is best, rather than trying to create the site in order to cater to the plants that you want. Think of it of, what's my existing climate, and let's plant it so it can do well in that climate and adapt to that climate. And there's a couple main xeriscape designs. One I call more of a mulched xeriscape design that is great for more native varieties. And we have full plant lists on our website. If you're interested in all those, I'll just go through some examples, but that mulch design is, all of those are native. And then there's more of that traditional, when we hear about xeriscaping, more of that rocky desert landscape.
What's the name of that website?
Our website is jswcd.org. And I'll be explaining some resources, and I'll show you where to find that in a second on our resources page. So here's just some examples for trees. I'm just running through these. We have shrubs, so it can be functional and very aesthetic. Flowers. And then you can incorporate grasses, just not the entire lawn grass. And the ideal thing with all of these plants is you will need 2 to 3 years of watering for establishment, but really the end goal is to have a pretty self-sustaining yard where all of these species are very hardy, and so you can kind of ignore them and just give them some extra drinks in the summer. And so step 4 is improving the soil. Again, we don't want to completely work against nature, and so depending on what your native soil type, that is the soil type that you're dealing with. So you want to make sure that you're selecting plants for your soil type, but it's certainly useful to amend those first few layers in order to help establish the plants. And so in order to improve the soil, we need to know what type of soil we're working with. So you can certainly just do a simple hand test, wet the soil. If it rolls up in a ball, has a lot of clay, we're notoriously known for our clay, I'd say just assume it's clay unless you know otherwise, because it's just everywhere. And then if it's super gritty, it has sand, and if it's somewhere in between, there's a lot of silt. The mecca of soil, the ideal soil type that we all love, is that fluffy loam. And so if you're able to get kind of loamy soil layers for the first couple layers, that'll be really great. But then after that, it's always important to know what native soils that you're dealing with. And if you want to get more fancy, there's also the Web Soil Survey. This is a USDA resource. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this. I just did a little example for where we are right now. If those were 2 distinct soil types, which they're not, they're very similar, but if they were, so for example, if 158D was a layer of hard pan that could describe drainage issues. So the soil types definitely tell a story. I would say this is a survey done back in the 80s, so I would take the actual boundaries with a grain of salt, but it can certainly be helpful as a starting point for you. But if you do have just random, wet spots in your yard, random pooling and flooding, it might be because you have two different soil types against one another. Here's some examples for soil amendments. I have this in the resources so you don't have to write it all down. By and large, compost is great for amending all soil types to get it back to loam. But there's just some examples there. Number 5 is mulch, so definitely similar to soil in terms of soil amendments, and it also helps with water holding capacity so that soil is not losing as much water to evaporation, and it also helps with weed suppression. So here's some examples of more of the bark mulch, and there's also rock mulch, and I'd say rock mulch is the most beneficial if you want to mulch right near a home. If you have bark mulch right against your foundation, you're kind of asking for ants to come out and play, so I would recommend sticking to more rocks around there. But otherwise, in sections further out from your home, bark mulch is much safer. And also, fire-wise, things to consider. We are, standing in this building, so in terms of fire-wise, having mulch right against the home, particularly bark mulch, is less recommended anymore. Just general watering practices, not watering midday. Please don't do that. Some of my neighbors do that and it makes me sad. And using drip and micro sprays, so catering depending on the type of plant, watering for that plant type. So the amount of water that you're going to use on your lawn is different than the water-wise landscaping. And changing, similar to lawn, changing your sprinkler and drip timers to account for weather and climate change as well, so you're not overwatering. So here's the examples for the landscaping. There's lots of different types of, I'm just gonna turn this off. Hello? Yeah, that just died. I don't know what's happening. Can you all hear me? All right. Okay, so those are the examples for the landscaping irrigation. And as always, it's important to maintain the landscape, make sure that you're deadheading perennials, mowing turf areas high, and checking for leaks. Just kind of a broken record there. All right, we're actually doing really well on time. So now I'm just going to review some resources, and then we have some time for questions, and I think there'll be time for a little longer break than you had before. So I'm promoting OWRD, who is here, their handbook, because it's really great. And so this has some great resources, particularly for well owners and more. Okay, sorry. This is as loud as I can talk. They have a water conservation section on page 9 through 10, and so that's super helpful for conserving water if you're on a well. There's some actually hard copies back there, and then there's also, this is available online as a PDF as well. And that's a link to their website. This is our website. It's at jswcd.org, and this is an example of our residential water conservation section, and that's also linked in our resources with a little pathway on how to get here. And within here, we have our fact sheets. I've made lots of plant lists over the years, and so here's just some of them. If you have any other specific questions, we also have a sign-up sheet where you can specify your interest, and feel free to reach out for more specific information. Even though you guys aren't in the city, this is still a great resource to have for around the home. Both Medford and Ashland have created resources for water-wise landscaping, and also there's great resources on irrigation practices. So within here, there's virtual tours where you can look around and see how different people have designed their properties. And so depending on the setup, so they have sloped yards, for example, ground cover, and they have different lawn tips, watering tips, and there's even more of an advanced plant search. So, you know, it's great to look at a plant list, but you don't necessarily know if it's going to work well in your setup. So if you have a certain plant in mind or a certain type of plant, like a ground cover, let's say ground cover that's good in the sun, you can narrow it down to get to that plant type. So that's a great resource. The Medford Water Garden Smart, and then Ashland Saves Water. They're nearly identical. They're just different because they have some examples are in Medford, some in Ashland. So if you have more of a rocky site, you might use Ashland, more clay, you might use Medford as the example. Medford Water Commission also has some great examples for lawn watering schedules, and they also have what they call Info Line, which is on their website, and they update that weekly during irrigation season. And so you can actually check in real time and see how many minutes you can water your yard based on the climate. And most of us likely over irrigate, and so it's another really great way to save money. And then similarly, they also have examples for watering shrubs. And finally, just kind of wanted to plug this. This is more of a state network, but you know, we all hear about all these different water issues and wondering what government's doing and all of the other water organizations. So there is a strategy that is happening to try and get a lot of resources together for water conservation. The last one was made in 2017. And so it's the Oregon Integrated Water Resource Strategy. They had different public input meetings throughout this past year, and there should be a draft within the next month, should be. So just if you're interested in more of that large scale statewide effort for water conservation and water strategies in general, that is happening right now. I think that is it.
Just one comment regarding Jackson versus Josephine County. Mm-hmm. So Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District functions in Jackson County.
Yes.
What resources on your website, because the applicant crosses both counties, mm-hmm. are applicable to both counties, and what assistance or not assistance can Josephine County patrons receive from Jackson County, since there's not really a soil and water conservation district that's functioning in Josephine County right now?
Yeah, definitely both districts have different capacities. I'd say, you know, any of the resources, even if you live outside, I'm happy to send you resources. We just have to be cognizant of how much time we're spending because we are paid by Jackson County tax dollars. So folks in Josephine County aren't eligible for our grants, and we likely can't go out for site visits either. It's just too much time, but I'm happy to do a brief phone call, and all of our resources on our website in terms of fact sheets and everything, well, you're welcome to explore that.
I was going to say, every year, you know, you drive around, you see people watering their lawn at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's just running down the street. Yeah. Are there any penalties, or, I mean, even your neighbors are doing it, so it's like, there's no water police out there to give a notice to the homeowner, like, gee, you know.
I know, I wish it was stricter. We're in this weird area where, because water here is relatively cheaper than other areas, like in California, there's just less regulation. I wish it was stricter. I wish we had more watering windows. Right now, it's just all recommendations. So all we can really do right now is education and talking to your neighbors. Times I've witnessed it, my neighbors were out of town. But yeah, it makes me sad when I see sprinklers kick on when it's pouring down rain, or yeah. Yeah, 3 p.m., 5 p.m., you know, you're just having to water extra. So yeah, it's right now all we can do is with that education, but I've asked the city about that, a couple cities, and it seems like eventually, maybe give it a few years, I think they might have to make those regulations stricter. So yeah. Good. Any other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On your website with the flowers and plants,
yes.
Does it also mention deer resistant?
Yes, we also have deer resistant plant types. If you're not able to find it, we have a little search box, or you can just contact me. But yes, we have a section on deer resistant.